All right, guys, welcome to another exciting edition of Victory Never Sleeps. Um, may have noticed, folks that are listening to this down the road on a podcast in the podcast form may have missed it, but we opened the show with a moment of silence for a member of ours that passed away over the last week since I spoke to you guys last. And we want to remember Nix Levang, um, fiance of folk builder Joe Drodos, and sweet girl, somebody that I had a really nice interaction with last time I saw her. Lovely to talk to. Wish I'd gotten to know her better and gone way too soon. So, may your ancestors welcome you. We miss you, Nix. Yeah, so kind of a somber note to start on, but an important one, I think. As usual, we are coming to you live on a number of different platforms. We are on Odyssey, Entropy, Twitch, Twitter, where we've really picked up a lot of live viewers, Rumble, here on YouTube, and on VK. We are also on Fridays released as a podcast on Apple, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, and the Amazon podcasts. So you can consume this information however you would like to. In all of those platforms, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about it, shout it from the rooftops, anything that you can do to get folks that would get something out of this to be here. I've said it before, one of the hurdles, or I guess one of the things that currently, one of the reasons that we are not bigger than we are currently is that so many people who would be or should be here don't know we exist. And we work hard to find ways of doing that, to build fame, to get our name and our reputation out there. But in this day and age, that's difficult sometimes. Trying to use the resources we've got, but one of our most powerful resources is all of you. If you guys like this and you think it's worthy, get it out there, share it, and have your friends give it a watch. Maybe it will change their life. Maybe it will just be entertaining for a little bit. Either way, we appreciate them and their participation. Guys, so Svan and I are doing a endless series of going through our lore, which is awesome. I think it's a really beneficial thing. I know that we're spending a lot of time covering the material. We do certainly answer all y'all's questions. We need questions. We like questions. We appreciate them, and they force us to, look at things from a different angle, or to, maybe come up with answers to questions that didn't occur to us, but that do occur to you. And so something to think about is your questions on here don't just supply answers to you. There's probably a lot of other people listening that have a similar question that just didn't get a chance to bring it up. So we do appreciate those. And absolutely such thing as a stupid question, but unless it is offensively so, we will still answer it. Appreciate you guys. Other stuff. So coming up, we have our next big event is Midsummer at Odinshöf. That is our longest running national event. It's a pretty big deal. It's likely to be the biggest event of the year, but that's never a guarantee. It's fantastic. It's at our oldest Hof. Odinshöf was established in 2015, so we have now a mathin. I think this is going to be, because we got it in the fall of 2015, so it's going to be our eighth midsummer there, I believe. It's a really special time, and it's a really powerful place. It's a beautiful spot if you guys haven't been there, and that's in Brownsville, California. If you're interested, please reach out to any of our folk builders. They can get you set up. And if you ask over in the chat, we're usually pretty well stocked with folks over there that can get you information also. So we'd love to see you there. Also, now we'll leave that be for a little bit. We got a couple other events coming up. Might as well put it out there. The next one after Midsummer is going to be something that I was supposed to solidify the dates on and didn't go ahead and do, but I need to. I'm going to go ahead and announce it here, folks. It's going to be the third weekend of July at Sigerheim. We're going to have Sigerbloat. I need to go ahead and get a graphic and stuff made and set up for that. And it's a stark reminder right now of something I was going to do this last week, but didn't. So I'll try to get to that tonight. Following that will be Freyfaxi at Baldershof. That's in Murdoch, Minnesota, and that's coming up in August. And then after that, in October, we will be celebrating Winter Nights for the first time in New Hampshire. That's slated to be at just the perfect weekend to see all the change in the trees. And it's likely to be a very, very nice event. I'm looking forward to it. It's at a spot we've never been before, in a state I've never been to before. So I'm excited about that. We'd love to see y'all there. But as you can see over the next few months, lots of opportunities to get together and see our folk and worship our gods together. And I look forward to seeing you guys at any or all of those events. So we're front loading everything on the top of the show, but I think it's probably the smartest and best way to do it. We will get to our poem here in a little bit, I promise. But as we mentioned last week, we had kind of the first round of our new merchandise drop. We've got a bunch of new stuff since then. Nick's putting it up now, but we have merch for, in addition to Victory Never Sleeps stuff from last week, we have merchandise up for the Asatru Academy. That is our AFA homeschool program that we are 2 years into and going strong. That stuff's there. We also got some different stuff there by popular demand. Apparently, when I find things displeasing, I make a face. People have immortalized that face into an image that we hope will entertain and raise a little bit of funds for what we're doing. So feel free to wear my scorn upon your person.
I know for a fact that is absolutely Go the East and his wife.
So there you go. As I said, with all this stuff, we're experimenting and figuring out what we're doing merch-wise. This is where we're at now, but there's no guarantee these products are going to stay, so they may very well be for a limited time. But we appreciate you guys if it's something that you want to get. Also, as always, donations are much appreciated, and they're how we're able to have nice things and do a lot of the important things that we do. If you want to donate, we've got the methods of doing that in the description. So there is that. And, everybody that has been generous, we appreciate you guys. All you folks that continue to be generous, thank you for that. It matters. It means a lot. And I suppose before we kick everything off, I will, wish you guys the happiest of May days. Today is officially May Day. Sometimes we observe it at different times to make it more convenient to get together and to celebrate. But today is the day, and I hope it has been a good one for you guys. I know it has been for me and my family. With that, Svan, do you want to bring people up to speed on where we're at? And Nick, if you could post the link. We are, as always, doing this in the Bellows translation. Feel free to use any translation that you'd like. Compare, contrast, see how it works for you, see which one you like. And we'll give you a moment to get there as Svan kind of brings us up to speed on what happened last episode.
All right. So we discussed a little bit about the origin of the poem and how it starts out is very different than the other encyclopedic poems. And again, this is very one-sided. Lord Odin is not having an exchange. He is just stating out the overall point that he is Lord Odin, and that King Gerold has made a great mistake in torturing him for 8 nights. And but the function of the poem is still the same. And we're going to get into some clarifications that need to be done, because again, a lot of what our ancestors heard from the poems was either already known to a great degree. I would argue. I think that especially upper class folks would have heard these stories pretty much since they were very, very little. And so understanding the names of certain places, or grasping the cosmology and the way that they saw the gods in the world. And though ours is slightly changed from theirs because of different understandings, all of those, mythic truths remain. And so we begin to see now that there's going to be a lot of listing of lore, in particularly with rivers coming up. But for the most part, we've been gaining an understanding of the layout of the heavenly realm, of heaven itself, and Ausgardr in particular. But we are going to move away from Ausgardr and kind of go into the heaven at large, and then eventually the Aryan triplication cosmos, where there is an upper, a middle, and a lower. And why it is important that so much of the upper, everything descends down into the other realms. So that's kind of what's going on. Lord Odin is proving by his knowledge who he is, and as he slowly brings it out, it becomes more and more of a doomed sense, which ultimately leads where we're going to the end of the story here, is that there is a great casting of doom upon King Gerold. Very swift, very, very brutal, but we need to get the point across for sure in the story. I believe we were on 26, I think, was the one we haven't covered yet. So we last left on stanzas 21 through 25.
Yep, we'll be starting on 26. And before we do, I just want to give a thank you to our most loyal and faithful donor, Ronald Blake. We appreciate you so much. You donated $5 with the Bought a Coffee deal. It says hail all, hail to you, Ronald. And he also donated $30 to the Asatru Academy. We appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much.
Dang. I mean, it's such bright fame that comes from him. Every onset we speak his name at almost the beginning of every VNS. That's pretty crazy to think about. And he's building bright fame for himself. I will definitely say a prayer for you at Thorsoft too, for your generosity. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
And again, a lot of folks new to Asatru, speaking the fame of someone else to someone else, or to the gods, or to your ancestors, is a great form of building their haminya, building their social might as well as their spiritual might. So speak the brave deeds of folks you know.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's start with 26.
Okay, so 26. Eikthyr is the heart. Of course, the English word heart, Hart, means a deer. The word deor in Anglo-Saxon just meant a wild animal of the woods. It was later added to be specifically to deer. So it is a hart, or an antlered deer, and its name actually gives reference to that. So Eikthyr is the heart who stands by Father's hall, and the branches of Lerith he bites, and from his horns a stream into Hvergelmir's drops. Thence all rivers run. So this is an interesting one because it creates a mythic connection between the heavenly realms and the underworld in an interesting way. The dropping rivers that come off of, or the dripping of Eikthyr horns. Now, I've always taken this to actually be a foreboding thing. Yggdrasil is the producer of the soul life of everything beneath Yggdrasil. The roots that run out and everything that descends down from the heavenly gods as it comes down from the gods of the sky as it descends. Life, the soul might, the power of kind of comes forth in the dripping dew of Yggdrasil. And when it lands in Earth's well, this begins a great process. But this is, in essence, bypassing that. And I think that everyone should kind of understand that the hearts nibbling on Yggdrasil's leaves are not a good thing. They weren't seen as a good thing. They were seen as a kind of consistent pulling away from the might of Yggdrasil. Hence the reason why the Nornir needed to always bathe the roots at the base of the tree in order to keep it going. So I think that this is an antagonistic force, and unfortunately, we have the names of the four hearts that nibble on the trees, and three of them are dwarven names that are mentioned later in the Volaspau, and or earlier in the Volaspau that we did, and there's no story as to how they may have become those hearts, those deer. So we don't have that. It's interesting though that out of those three, then there is the fourth, and it is Eikthyr, and that is not a dwarven name so far as we know. It means oak thorn, and it could have kind of different meanings that I've seen people kind of speculate. One is that it is thorny antlers like an oak tree. Others perhaps, of course, deer eating oak or acorns, and just meaning like it's consumer of oak acorns and has thorny antlers. I don't know. It doesn't seem to have any particular reference directly to either Yggdrasil or I think it's a name that would be understood to reference or a kenning for a deer. Now, there's another part in here, and the branches of Lerith. So Lerith, when you look it up, you'll mostly see where it's like mentioned as being a betrayer. And I don't think that that's correct at all. There is a word in Old Norse for the upper thigh and the leg, and it's lair, and or lyre, excuse me, and lyre, like it means as if you were to stand almost like Captain Morgan, like if your leg is arched and set about. And I believe that would be a better translation towards what we're speaking of with Yggdrasil and the roots kind of stepping out and over into realms. But, if anybody has any further kind of reads on that, please, I'm open. Let me know. I mean, we're all, figuring these things out together. And even people that are really, really fluent in Old Norse or very fluent in Icelandic still don't know full meanings of these. And when you look at the etymology, it becomes very, very convoluted. So we have Eikthyr, and he's drawing the dew, the power of Yggdrasil that it produces, and it's dripping from down its horns, and it drips all the way down to the underworld, into specifically the churning well, Hvergelmir. It is the original wellspring in the lower world. And it's a very, very important wellspring. I think that Snorri may have gotten some things a little painted. He painted Helgard very, very specifically, and I think it was from his Christian upbringing. But I think this also stands for Vergelmer as well. And, that's something to go into later. But Vergelmer is the lower realm wellspring, and it's important to remember that every wellspring has a root from Yggdrasil, which resides in heaven. And again, the referencing as to why so many people don't know where those roots go or have not seen where those roots show up, and why Lord Odin does, is because they extend beyond even the heavenly realms. They go all throughout, and this is the main root, the tap root that Yggdrasil, springs from, the ancient primordial well. And we're about to go into the rivers that come out of this well, also with the rivers of the upper and the middle world. So when it says here that into Vergelmer drops, thence all rivers run, speaking there specifically of the primordial rivers, the Elviar, the ancient rivers of creation, and they reside in the lower realm, the place of substrate and cosmic matter that flows out from there, and has since the beginning with Muspelheim and Niflheim. So as we go into this, it's kind of a preface. It's gonna be very. If anybody's reading it right now, they might be looking at it like, wow, that's a big word salad. But it's really important to remember that, first off, nobody's really done this that to my recollection, other than the Asatru Folk Assembly, has looked at the scholarly nature of the way that these rivers are set up and translated. So
when Svan says the Asatru Folk Assembly, he's being humble. He means Witan Svan Herul. This is linguistically in general, but specifically with these rivers, it's been really something he's put a lot of himself into and doing that digging. And so this is his hard work paying off for us.
Thank you. But I mean, collectively too, having these thought, like being able to speak to the Gothar and to talk about how and why the cosmic placement, the reason why there is the upper, middle, and lower, why there's a lot of misconceptions, and why people they know about the Elviar, but they just kind of write off the other rivers as being holy rivers, or it's just a river, that is special for the story or something like that. And I don't think that's the case. In actuality, I think that the rivers, for whatever reason, perhaps poetically, rhythmically, they were all brought together. But if we use some detective work and kind of work through them, you can actually break the rivers up to understand and see a patterning. And that is one of the big things that I always harp on, is patterning of mythos, where things are and where things go and where they return. And there is a lot of movement in the stories that are worth looking at. And I think they have, a great amount of value. So I guess what we could do is let's this is a lot of rivers going from 27 to 30. Let me see if I can do this, because it might be better if let me try and okay. Ooh. All right. So, and then if I can just move this over. Perfect. Okay. So we have the rivers that are mentioned. Lord Odin is basically speaking about the fact that he sees and knows the rivers. There are rivers that flow amongst the gods. There are rivers that flow amongst men, and there are rivers that flow in the underworld. And the way that we know this is that we've already received the 11 rivers that are in Vergelmer and that flow out from there. So when you look at the other rivers, you begin to see that the upper realm, the heavenly rivers, have names that are all descriptive and sometimes spiritual or overly broad. And then when you look at the rivers in the middle world, they become very specific, and they're specific towards the tasks of the folk and what the folk do in rivers. And so you'll see the poetics of the heavenly rivers and the rivers of the underworld, but in the middle, you'll notice them to be very, very matter of fact. And so I bring, I bring this up a lot because if you think about with Asgard proper in the heavenly realms, when Lord Thor walks out, he cannot traverse the bridge that descends from the walls of Asgard to the well in heaven. He cannot walk that bridge. So he has to take one of the heavenly rivers, or it's actually two of them, and step over them and come out of Asgard into heaven proper by traversing over these rivers. And these rivers are Kormt and Ormt, the cooling one and the serpentining one. So you'll see again, they're very, very broad, but they're not as negative as or as murk or as kind of foreboding as the Elvigar. And then you'll notice the middle rivers. So let's go over just the stanzas themselves. Sith and Vith, Seiken and Eiken, Svol and Fimblethul, Gunthro and Fjorm, Rin and Renandi, Gipel and Gopel, Gamul and Gjervimul, that flow through the fields of the gods, Thien and Veen, Thol and Hol, Groth and Gunthorin. So clearly, when we speak about Gipel, Gopel, Gamul, and Gjervimul that flow through the fields of the gods, those four in specifics are heavenly rivers. And Gipel translates to the lucky river, and Gopel is the deep cut or gapped river. Gomel is the babbling brook or babbling river, and Gjervimul is one of my favorite ones. I don't quite know. I've looked at both translations; they both fit, but it could mean the sprouting like a spear being thrusted, or it could mean a garlic, because again, Gjervimul is in relation to garlic and the sprouting of a spear. So, I don't know. Garlic is very, very, it's a heavenly herb, and I don't know. I like to imagine that, the luck of the garlic leek and the healing of it. But no telling. And I just wanted to place both of those up there for everyone to kind of maybe go and check the etymologies and see what you come up with, and bring them up to me. So yeah, those three, you'll notice that they're jammed together. You'll find the Alvigar rivers intermixed with all the other rivers, and I think that's why it caused a lot of confusion. But again, pulling it apart and suddenly looking at the names, you kind of see a distinct pattern. There's the mournful rivers of the lower world, the kind of happy rivers, the strong river, the lucky river, the river of judgment, which is another big point about a river being in the upper realm. And then you see in the middle realm, the 14 rivers that are absolutely related to menial tasks. And I don't know if they're maybe even Nordic names for existing rivers like the Rhine or the Danube. I don't know about that, but we'll move into some more. So in 28, we have, and these are some of the human rivers or the Midgard rivers, and then immediately followed by rivers from the underworld. And again, this might have been a poetic issue, but it's caused a lot of confusion for people. So Vino is one, They Svin another, and Thjothnuma a third. Neat and Not, Non and Hron, Slave and Hrith, Silk and Ilk, Viv and Von, Vond and Strond, Gjol and Leipt, that go among men, and hence they fall to hell. So here we have a couple of things. Right off, you can see like Vino is the river that's surrounded by grapes. And of all of them, I would kind of correlate that with the Rhine and the grape production down there. But there is another river that's confused in this. There's Vino and Vina. So we have the river of grapes and wine versus the river of vines. And so that, again, causes a lot of confusion. So, and I don't know if Nick, you can post maybe in the chat the heavenly rivers and the Midgard, like when we're done, so that way people can kind of take notes if they want. Oh, actually, there's an oversight too. I saw one translation that I have that is not on my list that I sent you. So moving into 29, we know for a fact that Kormt and Ormt are heavenly rivers. And it is important to understand that in order for Thor to leave Ausgarth and go to the well, he must traverse these rivers. And it's Kormt and Ormt are twin rivers, and they're referred to as the Kerlog. The Kerlog, or it's Kerlog, is the splitting of the two rivers in twain, but they are sourced from the same place. So in 29, Kormt and Ormt and the Kerlogs twain shall Thor each day wade through when doomed to give. He forth shall go to the ash tree Yggdrasil, for heaven's bridge burns all in flame, and the sacred waters seethe. So at this point, it is, and you can even see Bellows' kind of translations linked to this as well. But the idea that there is a triplicate level and that the gods are witnessing you now. They're not witnessing you after you die. They're not witnessing you to measure your heart on a stand with a feather or your Filkia or whatever it might be. They are witnessing you now. They want to see you now. And they mark your doom or your blessing based off of your deeds in the current moment, as they are above time and can kind of see all of that flows. So there is, a notion that a lot of people are going with being judged by the gods in the afterlife. And I think that is antithetical to the way our ancestors thought, and really how we think today. When you hear people in Asatru say, the gods witness me, or may the gods witness you, that's not to state that this is gonna, like, I hope they're writing this down for your court case in the afterlife. No, they mark you and bless you now.
This is a really subtle distinction, and I think it's something worth noting. I think that there's a separate trial each and every day of your life. Sentencing may occur in the way that you realize it when you cross the veil. But you're trying to think, because it is very subtle, and I don't know if people will necessarily grasp the difference. Each of your deeds, all of your deeds are witnessed by the ancestors and by the Aesir. There is a steady there's a steady flow of judgment of your deeds and your behaviors, and bestowing a favor or not in the present. There is also effect on whether, either the ancestors or the Aesir want to have anything to do with you on the other side of the veil or not. Both things occur, but it's not like you save it up and then at the end of your life there's some kind of tally run on things. It's an ongoing, ever-present ebb and flow of your worth based upon your deeds and your fame and how you live your life. It's very much an art to it. So it's not, and everything, this is meaningful as well, and it's a deviation from like focusing on the text right now, but it is relevant to judgment. Deeds exist. Once they have happened, they have happened. You can't negate them by, you can't negate them. They are there. You can counterbalance them by making right what you made wrong. You can repair things in that way, but we're laying down orlog with our deeds constantly. And there is no such thing as a perfect and unblemished record of deed. But the best way to fix the imbalance caused by ignoble behavior is to overcompensate for it with lots of noble behavior. Feeling bad about it or saying sorry for it doesn't fix it. It's a nice gesture and it's important. You should be self-aware and feel ashamed when you do something wrong. You should absolutely apologize to the person that you have wronged or to the gods or people you feel you have let down by doing wrong. But all of that pales in comparison with the fix what you broke to the best of your ability first. It's fundamental to our concept of justice, and it's fundamental to our concept of cosmic judgment. But yeah, it's very much through deeds, and it's a running thing that is always ever present. And we mentioned at the it's weird how it flows through the program, but we mentioned earlier in terms of Ronald's generosity, also in terms of the celebration of Nyx after her passing. The things that we do to build fame for ourselves and for each other affects the reputation that is steadily being calculated and recalculated and built, and the judgment that's constantly occurring. It's worth mentioning that we believe very much that continues beyond the veil as well. Just because someone's passed, or even if they've passed long ago, the continued celebration of things and doing deeds in their name and going before the Aesir and, asking them to look kindly upon those people and to care for them. All of those things build someone's fame on the other side of the veil as well. That concept of the currency of your reputation transcends earthly mortality.
Yeah, like kind of to piggyback on what you're saying is some folks might say like, oh, when you die, the gods are going to gather down in the underworld, which again is a huge and very, very interesting anti kind of Aryan mythos. Generally, the underworld was seen as a place that was relatively untouched by the gods, save a few, and the fact that they're down there is extremely, important / powerful. But we're speaking of the fact that the gods can witness you in life, in death, and again, the placement of perhaps even the elevation of the soul to rise up and or be allocated as Alvar or Disir, so that the it's more of a circular thing instead of kind of simply, elevator go down and that's it. So I think that is something lost on a lot of folks, and they're again, there is so much fragmentation in the relation to the afterlife from Snorri, but I do believe that the mythos is clear enough to paint that understanding, as the gods do view you and judge you, as well as do your ancestors, and your ability to join them again. If you're a Nithingr of such vileness, the gods have marked you for doom. Your ancestors do not accept you. And you clearly have wrought doom upon yourself here in the middle world amongst your folk. That's not good. I think that's the ultimate, like, now this is.
Well, so while we're on that, and we take anybody just tuning in, we do this to the backdrop of the lore we're going through. Sometimes it's a straight run through, and sometimes it leads to points that we think are really important to make for folks to understand Asatru and how, all of the implications of that. One of the things to admit up front is no one knows exactly the depth and breadth of the afterlife. It is, perhaps the most mysterious thing. But we do know some things, and these are the things that we know in general. There is, for most people, 3 basic things that can happen. For the vast majority of people, your soul returns to the halls of your ancestors, and there you commune with your ancestors, you look on after your descendants, and whatever else there is for you to do there, we will all find out one day. But in general, that is one concept of it. But even amongst that, there is a degree of elevation. It's like when you go on the other side and your ancestors like, I guess he's one of ours. All right. And they kind of take you in. That's one thing. If they're like, they prepare a seat for you and you are, they're so happy to see you because you're awesome. You can be exalted in that way as Alfar or Disir, as a Alf or a Dis, to look on and serve the tribe of your ancestors by watching out for your descendants, your ancestral lands, things that way. If you are a hero or someone that the gods particularly give their favor to or want to elevate, they can elevate you and you can ascend to be something more than you are. That we see in stories where it talks about coming to the halls of the gods. And any place in between mortal and that realm that they feel you've warranted ascension to, or that they on a whim decide to put you at. But the awful situation is if you have so disgusted through your deeds, both your ancestors and the Aesir, that nobody wants to claim you, and that the existence of your soul as a person is detrimental to the value of our folks' existence, then we see where it talks about the corpse strand, Naustrand. That's where we hear about the venom and Nidhogger ripping, sucking the blood of the corpses and the wolf ripping them asunder. That's about breaking down the individual into your component parts to be recycled into the folk soul that hopefully they can be put to better use next time. And we all want to avoid that by being people that our ancestors and our gods are proud of. Just as a side note, because it was something I was writing something on last night. A couple of things we should probably hit before we get back into it. We do have a couple of questions. They're not necessarily glued to where we're at in the lore, but I think they're interesting and something to get to on here. We have an Odyssey question. Appreciate all our listeners over on Odyssey. We would like to hear from you guys more. I'm glad you asked a question. The Winter Ghost. If genuine psychics can communicate with spirit knowledge, with spirits foreknowledge, I wonder whether it is possible that a medium or two, preferably Scandinavian, could connect to ancestors of the folk soul and recover the lost myths and lore through the process called psychography. Possible or extremely far-fetched. First, possible, absolutely. It's funny. And I'm sure psychologically there's a word for this. And these may seem like silly examples, but they paint the picture in my head. If you ask most people if they believe that aliens exist, certainly they do. It's billions of stars and galaxies and infinite universe. Sure, somewhere out there there's life. Most people don't have trouble thinking that's fine and signing off on it. Okay, cool. But do aliens come here and abduct people? Well, no, that's absurd. The distance between that is interesting. We also have that with, any number of other things. Does someone believe in ghosts? Well, yes. Okay, cool. So can the ghosts, turn lights on in your house? I'm sure. Okay, I could buy that could happen. But at what point do you visualize that you're sitting in front of the light switch and watching it physically move from on to off or off to on? People have a lot more trouble when you put it in concrete terms. And any of the things that are relevant in our lore, we celebrate and buy onto much easier if they happened in the distant past. And we have so much more skepticism or feel much more uncomfortable with them if they're going on in our present, like right before our eyes. So yeah, most people that call themselves mediums, if they were to sit there and do that, I think many of us would probably chuckle or find it silly or find it preposterous for a lot of different reasons. I think we live in a time to where there is a cynicism, a distrust, a skepticism about all of the things. I think that we are very removed from living a spiritual existence, and so many of us either overtly or just by happenstance tend to be brought up in a secular or atheistic mind frame. And I think that the society in the West for a very long time has done that. So it's harder for us to open ourselves to those things. But certainly we believe our ancestors could. So I absolutely believe that people could now. I also think that, most of these things probably transcend language. I could see if it was incumbent that a spirit was speaking a Scandinavian language for a Scandinavian speaker to be the medium. But realistically, I think that could happen with any of our folk. And I don't think geography is a factor. I think we are exactly as many generations removed from the original practitioners of our faith than, someone in Scandinavia. And I think if we want to seriously look at that, our faith goes much beyond when our folk migrated to Scandinavia. By that now, by that logic, why not someone in Germany? Why not somebody in the Caucasus? But either way, yes, I think those things could definitely happen. I think the more we evolve as a folk to view the world through a spiritual lens, I think the tighter that we build our relationship to the Aesir, the more that opens up as a very real reality. And so I absolutely believe that's a thing. Now, would I be very hesitant to believe a lot of people who had suspicious claims with it? Absolutely. But the details are what matter and the context are what matter. There are a number of folks that if they were to tell me that, I'd put great stock in what they had to say. So I don't think that's a ludicrous thing to ask at all. What are your thoughts on that, Svan?
Well, I think that, I mean, we do have, in essence, a medium practice within our faith. I think that anybody that's a little bit familiar with Seder, or at least the revitalized traditions of Seder, which is very, very scant and few and far between, you'll have a lot of people that will try to level that it's, evil witchcraft of Asatru, if you will. But the overall reinvigoration of Seder is a medium work. The ability to take spirits within, to open oneself up and then embrace those spirits and speak forth. But any type of work that I have ever experienced in relation to Seder is that it is not specific, very rarely specific. So I wonder, again, when we get into some of the meat and potatoes and the translations and so on and so forth, I don't, and this is just, again, me from my experience with Seder and it's working, and how it works, it doesn't seem to correlate completely. I think that another thing that's interesting is a lot of that which comes from the ancestors and that which comes from the lower realm is very much unabided by the things that hold the middle or Midgard together. So I think that a lot of the ways in which our ancestors commune with us no longer hold true to certain norms, like even the concept of language itself, and the facets of order that keep Midgard going. Instead, that's why we often, have run-ins with our ancestors, whether they're in dreams or whether they're in visions or what have you, in which they are hard to define, sometimes scary, because again, our correlation to death with them can oftentimes be veiled with these emotional languages or these spiritual languages that come from deep and primordial feelings that we have. These back of the deep part of the soul is interacting with an ancestor, and it's not often done in just simple, hey, how you doing? Here's a notebook. It always seems to have a great amount of I guess vagueness, but more feeling, emotion, and kind of an immediate connection of understanding what the ancestors perhaps trying to convey is understood, but it's never spoken of. Sometimes their faces are obfuscated, and but you get an idea of what is going on. Very rarely do they, and especially just in a very unique way, they sometimes do speak to us. And I've met many people who have spoken of the fact that they have dreams of their ancestors speaking to them, but it's usually only, a few words, kind of a reinforcement, or perhaps like a lost sense of something from the middle world that isn't necessary anymore for them. So I don't know. I don't know about the transference. And then also too, Elserigo, that you said it is, if I was up here claiming these translations came to me while I was, under the cloak or something of that nature. There'd be a good amount and a relative sense of speculation that would come with that, that should come with that. And I think some of the books that you might run into on the market, or even from the 80s and 90s, is that there was a lot of kind of more interpretive, emotional senses of people saying like, well, you know, the gods spoke to me in this way. And I think, again, there is a right time for that. And I think me and Alcirigo, they have talked about this a lot, is what, you know, at what point do you want to believe and know, and we do know in a lot of cases from our personal experiences, but when we talk to someone else and they say something, or, oh, you know, the gods told me this, if they're shooting, you know, flat out, I don't think that that's genuine. You know, if the gods are speaking to you, you find that often more in many different layered ways. And again, Midgard is the place of time. Ausgarder in heaven is the place above time, and the ancestors are below time. So they're kind of out of, and they have a tendency to work in different ways than the way we conceive the gods working, and or the ancestors. So I don't know. Again, if it was done and somebody said word for word, you know, this is what I was told, it would.
There's an all approach here. As far as possibilities, gods can do what they want. They're gods and they're powerful. If one of them wanted to appear before me right now and say, hey, grab a pen and paper, I got a story to tell you, that would be amazing. I don't necessarily think there's a high likelihood of that, but I'm also not going to put limitations on the possibilities of the might of our gods. But yeah, typically these things have come in the form of sparks of inspiration or dreams or vague feelings, and their truth has been borne out through comparison with other trusted people who've had similar things, or that the truth rings through in experiences that they've had. It's hard to tell because the line between touched by the gods and crazy is very, very thin. And sometimes you find people that, depending on the time of day, are on either side of that line. The other thing, what we really need, and we are building towards and hoping to develop, is a living tradition that encourages this in a healthy way. There is a combination of things that are necessary for an optimal relationship like that to happen. You need somebody first who is wired towards that, who has an inclination or an ability in that way. You also need that person to be well versed in our lore, well versed in the touchstones that would make sense of the messages they get. You also need somebody who's building a relationship with our gods and who's well tied in to that gift cycle and that relationship. So in the past, in the modern history of Asatru, we have people that are scholastically advanced, but haven't built the religious relationship with our gods, or also are not practitioners and do not have inclination towards that situation. Or you have people that maybe do have some inclination towards that situation, but want a shortcut as opposed to developing all those other things. They just jump right in and start with crystals and rocks and pass the rune TikTok nonsense with it, and it's kind of frittered away with frivolity. You also, in the Sather thing, seems to be a haven for a lot of homosexual gentlemen. That was a very prominent thing in the 90s and the early 2000s. That I think that level of ill health doesn't encourage meaningful interaction in this way either. There's a lot of different ways, but no, absolutely, I think that can happen. I think that where it may come through very subtly and in brief glimpses to us now, the more we build that relationship with our gods, I think it will come through clearer and better over time. So certainly I think that'll happen. Next question. Just getting through some of these because we have them here. We'll get back to the text.
Yeah,
I'm going to answer this next one and we'll go back into it. From Emily in Florida, Mike wants to know if he wears the Altariogothic disapproval muscle shirt to the Hoff, is that considered Altariogothic disapproval? Yeah, he would have to wear it inside out, so disapproval is facing him for not dressing appropriately at the Hoff, unless the AC breaks down. Now, y'all are in Florida. I like dressing up, but I will tell you what, at Sigerbloat at Sigerheim, I could not. I was wearing a tank top and shorts, and I sweat all the way through both to where they were dripping. So no AC. You can wear it right side out. You wear it in there with the AC functioning properly. You got to wear it inside out. All right. With that silliness aside, let's get back into our text, if you will.
Okay. So, just to give people some kind of insights to with some like the river names are again deeply mixed. You can see the Elvigar, or the 11 rivers from the underworld, are intermixed throughout the stanzas. So that kind of again emphasizes the point that it is very, very, mixed up. But it kind of comes to an end here in stanza 29, that we just covered. That Cormpt and Orb are the two twin rivers that are sourced together, that flow again. And we've already established that we know other rivers that flow throughout heaven, including Thund, because it is mentioned by Lord Odin that Thund wraps around Valhall. So, that the idea is that as the poet is painting these pictures, our ancestors understood this. There was a land in which it was, and the rivers flowed through it. And I think it is interesting that, that there are the 11 above and 11 below. We know for a fact there are 11 below. But the reason why I placed the 11 in the uppers was because of the placement of the names. Whereas in the middle realm, we have the river Thien, the thin river, Veen, the wine river, Thol, the patient river, Hol, the holy river. And it goes on and on. The river ruled by the people, the useful river, the netting river. All of these names are correlated to time, cyclic nature, the nature of the folk in their usage of it, so on and so forth. Or they're very matter of fact, like Strand is simply just the river beach, or the beach the river that has beaches upon its side. So very, very matter of fact. Whereas, like again in verse 28, when we talk about Silkur and Ilgur, that's the slurping river and the gloom river, or the river of gloom inducing. That's another one that I went through. So looking at the word ilk, a lot of times most people translated that as the sighting of a female wolf. And it took me a long while to figure out what they were referring to, and specifically in the poem. And I think that they missed the mark. It's not a female wolf, it's the sighting of one. And what does the sighting of a female wolf mean? That you have baby wolves and that you have an issue to deal with. And there is this foreboding sense of seeing that you're going to have to deal with a long, protracted situation. And it brings you down. It's kind of like a doom setting. So in that instance, like when you go and look it up, you'll see a lot of this kind of brought about where it's like, oh, it's the sighting of a female wolf, and it makes no sense in the flat. But when you start to look at the Haiti and you start to look at the poetic feeling, Ullr is about just seeing it gives you doom. It's the drawing down. So, and they're all mixed up, and thankfully, like I said, Nick is going to post it up. There is one mistake in mine with the rivers of Midgard. Number 12, the non-river. I have that translation, but I can't find it right now, and I really, really wish I had it. But so on that list, it's going to say not known yet, and that's because I was still working through all of them. So 27, 28, and 29 are the river stanzas, if you will. And again, if you know the Alvigar, you can pull those apart and then work through the others. And you see that there are, 11 that are kind of, dealing with luck and dealing with being judged or what have you. And then in the middle one, it's the netting river, the waving river, the hungry river. So we'll move into stanza 30, but I think if Nick could post those, these are my translations. And I know too, I did a piece on Twitter or X covering this, and I believe my translation is there as well. And the one that is missing. So, not to beat a dead horse, we'll move to horses. In stanza 30, we start to see Lord Odin talking about the horses of the gods. And again, knowing the rivers is about Lord Odin being able to explain his knowledge of that. And again, understanding, it's like knowing the vehicles of the gods, the points of their movement, is another kind of flex. And of course, it's for the poet to know the names of the gods' horses. So we have in 30, we have Glav and Gillr, Glair and Skidbrimir, Silfrintop, Sinur, Gisel, let me see. Yeah, Gisel, Faulhofnur, Goldtop, Letfeti. On these steeds the gods shall go when doomed to give each day they ride to the ash tree, Yggdrasil. Again, reference towards the fact that the gods are moving towards the tree upon their horses to the tree in the center of heaven, to the well, where they're going to sit in their doom seats and look upon the world beneath and mete out their doom. And doom is another word that it's worth noting that means kind of the inevitableness, not bad. It's that which you gain from your deeds, whether good or ill. So it's more of a neutral, daima. So in this here, we have like Baldur's horse is Letfiti, where it's said that springs of water come from the hooves of Baldur's horse. Goldtop, of course, is Lord Heimdall's. It means golden top, silver top. And so they're poetic heighties towards all of the gods' horses. Of course, like Gleither means glad or, joyous one. Golden and shining, strong and like Sinur means like strong and tawny. When you see the muscles rippling underneath the horse's skin. And, this is a good trait. And these are all, again, very, very poignant towards our ancestors and seeing that the gods rode on strong vehicles, strong modes of transportation and movement that were extensions of their power, much like in many other polytheistic religions where we speak about the vehicle, Aryan religions in particular, and the vehicle of the gods. So that's 30. We move into 31. Now, there is some confusion here on this translation, and I think that this might simply be a typo because of the clarification in other works that speak of it repeatedly in a different way. 3 roots there are, that 3 ways run. Neath the ash tree, Yggdrasil. Neath the first lives Hel. Neath the second, the frost giants. Neath the last are the lands of men. So this is the one that, when we speak of the first that lives in Hel, that the underworld is often referred to as Helgard, Helheim, but it's also on the edge of Niflheim, the misty nether. Hell just means that, that which is shrouded and beneath. So this would correlate to Hvergelmr, the torrent of the souls, the well spring. And of course, Snorri paints this as being, serpents and Nidogr. But again, I think in this case, and I'm not waving that down or even accusing him, is that, yes, there was definitely Christian overtones when he painted the poetry of the underworld, especially in relation to, the foreign religion, the Judaic sect that he was a part of, clearly painted the world of death as, a very different place. And they had done that even since the Romans or the Greeks and the Romans and the Latin translations of the Bible. They again took those words and, painted their own views on it. The only good thing I could say is that he clearly did not paint on like the hellfire of Gehenna or what have you from that religion. Instead, he kept true to the idea that it's a place of stillness, place of coldness, a place that is away from time. So neath the last are the lands of men. The only way that I've kind of speculated this is that the flowing of Earth's well and the root in heaven is above the lands of men, and below it is the lands of men. So I've kind of taken this to mean that like the third root is in the upper realm, and beneath that root flows or walks the lands of men. And again, referencing towards the idea that lerda means stepping over or having a kind of arcing sense to it. And it's worth noting that what Yggdrasil is again, the cosmological circulatory system. And we see how the roots represent those contact points. So, again, Hvergelmr, and then neath the second, the frost giants, of course, is in the east. This is Mimir's well. That's the well in which Lord Odin, and most people are familiar with the story where he rips out his eye and places it in the well. That is most likely the reference that they're referring to. So I honestly believe that this is either an odd translation or in reference to the root above the lands of men, which would then be the heavenly root. But, I don't have the answers all the time. So it's kind of like one of those that I'm still working on. So now we begin to go a little bit into Yggdrasil and a little bit of the inner workings of the cosmological circulatory system. And now we have the one who can go through all the realms as well. It is Ratatoskr in 32. Ratatoskr is the squirrel, who there shall run on the ash tree Yggdrasil. From above the words of the eagle he bears and tells them to Nidhogg beneath. So we have the again where things go and why they go, the connection between the top and the bottom being maintained. The heavenly souls that preside over on the top of the tree, the eagle and the hawk. We have the middling soul, the one that goes back and forth, and then we have the nethering soul, which is Nidhogg. And again, it's placing poetic connection between the top and the bottom that ultimately creates the circular pattern. Ratatoskr means chattering teeth, and kind of goes along with the idea that it's talking. I always have kind of taken this to be the spirit of life itself and how it moves from the top to the bottom and back again, and maintaining this ordered balance between two polarities. I don't know. I find it very interesting that Ratatoskr is in the shape of a squirrel. It's kind of fun. It's definitely one that I always kind of incorporate into any drawings or charts of Yggdrasil. Is worth remembering that Ratatoskr is there, maintaining that balance.
The juxtaposition between the eagle and Nidhogg is important too. I mentioned the processes of death. I guess the a symbol of ascension of the soul is the eagle. We see All-Father Odin take an eagle form when he ascends from the mountain after his quest for the mead, and that's how he returns it to Ausgarther. The concept of the eagle as taking flight and ascending is, certainly symbolizes the soul's ascension into something more and something better. Just as at the bottom, at the root, you have the gaping maw of Nidhogg consuming and sucking the blood from the corpses and destroying and dissolving the soul. So I think that's a very interesting, and beautiful way to describe those two polarities in, the evolution or devolution of man.
Here we have some clarification that needs to be done. We already know that Eikthrnr is mentioned as one of the hearts. So the question that a lot of people have is Eikthrnr a Heiti for one of the four that are mentioned here now, or are there five? But again, these are where we start to see some of those miswritings, or these kind of little things that are not quite. And again, it's because written and composed many years after. There's lots of issues and problems. There's pieces that were placed in from other pieces sometimes. So here we speak in 33. 4 hearts there are, that the highest twigs nibble with necks bent back. Dayan and Dvalin, Dunir and Drirathor. That's a tough one. And again, the missing parts of 33. I have some translations from Boog or Booga. I don't know how it's exactly pronounced. I think it's Boog. That there may have been a reference to exactly how these Dvergar became these hearts. And we noticed that nothing ever kind of within the circle within the circulatory system, nothing simply disappears, nothing simply goes away, but is converted or transitioned into another place or another thing. And we see this, again, I've always taken that the eagle and the hawk are the souls of the originating Aesir, that it is the original father and mother, the Deus father and Deus mother is Bor and Bestla, and that their souls ascended as the hawk and the eagle. And here we see again the story of the Dvergar being shifted into hearts for some reason, and always painted as these deer, these hearts are not seen as something good or something that's establishing order, but instead are nibbling away at the cosmic order that is the tree.
This is fun. What is the origin of the dwarves?
So the Dvergar are in the creation stories of how they come about, is that they are first the maggots that twist and turn in the flesh of Ymir.
So, cool. I appreciate that.
What?
No, when I set you up, you spike it, and that's what I think. So here's the thing. The dwarves weren't like midgets that mine under the earth, didn't transform out of literal maggots. And there's not actual like venison chewing on actual leaves.
Right.
Both of these things, though, talk about, and I will go more into this when we talk more about Yggdrasil here, but the perpetual refreshing of something lest it rot and wither and die. Maggots eat the rotting of a corpse. They are among the many things that cause decomposition of things. They eat away the dead flesh, they consume that, and over time, all traces of something disappear because they get consumed. These hearts are endlessly eaten at this tree and causing damage to it. There's more to it here, but I think that the symbolism does transfer over between so many of the negative forces in our cosmos are described as eaters, devourers, ravenous, Etons, about consumption and eating away our existence. If you look at, the death of the gods in Ragnarok, those deaths come about by poison that dissolves or by being devoured by the wolf. The wolves seek to eat and devour the sun. This forcing of chaos consuming and eating away at the good and the ordered existence in the world is a very, very important theme that we see again and again in the lore. And I think it's, worth highlighting here.
Yeah, and this part too is again lost in these sections thereafter, are kind of lost with they speak of one singular heart and then they expand out to the four. They speak of one singular serpent, but now they soon expand out. And this is a part that has confused a lot of people and have left, in essence, perhaps these names are in relation to other stories and they have lost their significance because the stories were lost or were not able to be, written down. But I was looking at 34, or excuse me, I did say, Dirathror. In 34, there are more serpents there are beneath the ash. And I think this is important to understand, like what Asatru was just saying about the dissipation factors that have to be present on all three levels. The three levels is an emphasis point that is never ever lost in our mythos and really in any other Aryan mythos. We have the upper realm, the middle realm, and the lower realm. We have Hell herself, the least, it's still dissipative, obviously, breaking of wholeness with death, but the least problematic or the least threatening is placed and given stewardship over the souls. In the middle, we have Jormungandr, and he is again in stasis, or catalytic. I mean, he's in this state of being held, but is on the edges of just destroying everything the moment. And then the dweller in the fens, Fenrir or Fenris, is brought into heaven itself. So again, in our stories, these dissipative forces, and it is the least threatening at the time, but becomes the most threatening. These forces and the upper, middle, and lower are very, very important. And so here we see the below, if you will. So more serpents there are beneath the ash than an unwise ape would think. I love that one. The translation there is Osvidra Appa. Witless, a witless ape. A buffoon or a crude person. There is Goin or Moin, or Goin and Moin. Gravvitnir sons, Grabak, and Gravoludr, Ovnir and Svafnir, shall ever methinks gnaw at the twigs of the tree. And again, the usage of the word twigs, kind of twigs, meaning, of course, the offshoots, the branches thereof. And when you look at a lot of these, one of the things that I've always kind of stuck out in my mind was Svafnir and the dragon Fafnir in the Volsunga saga, or the Sigurd story, where he fights the dragon Fafnir, and kind of seeing a little bit of like Gravvitnir, again the wolf. I need to look the Grav part up, but here we see again, it's a point of dissipative force. We see that even in heaven, Fenris has gotten in and has been taken back out, but we still see the hearts that nibble upon the tree. So in every level, there is a constant state of dissipation from the ordering of the universe. And here we see the serpents gnawing and twisting on the root, the connective root, the support root, the tap root that is in the underworld, and what ultimately would break the cycle. If that root is severed and there is no allocation for ascendancy after death, then the soul might of the folk would be cut, and that would greatly deter, or kind of not deter, but in essence, for the sake of story and the understanding of why the gods have reasoning, why the gods interact with the folk, why the soul is important, removing that third root would greatly cause a detriment to the upper world where that root goes. And I think that's lost on a lot of people. I think when they try to paint the Yggdrasil as being this kind of all the roots are in the underworld. No, the reason why this root in specific, the one in the lower realm, is being gnawed upon and trying to be broken is because it would break the cycle that exists throughout the entire cosmos. And generally, too, when we speak of worms and serpents, the under the earth, the slithering, curling, and moving things, if you will. Dragons is definitely kind of the way we, the worm, the verms are kind of the go-to representation, but these things are the coiling things, the pieces that sift and grind through the earth. Let's see. So we're moving into 36.
All right. So before we go into 36, I want to revisit the point I was making previous. So the cosmic tree that orders the worlds, that supports existence, that is life to our ordered existence as Aryan people with Aryan gods, is personified by this tree. It is constantly under assault by the forces of decay and rot. If nothing is done to it and everyone stops, it rots, it withers, it dies, and it is consumed by the forces of chaos. If the forces in the cosmos stop spinning, the wolves devour the sun and the moon. This is the meta meaning behind Victory Never Sleeps. In order to win, it is a constant process that we need to win every single day. We always need to be moving forward, because when we stop, entropy leads to decay, leads to destruction. Our lore teaches that in countless ways, over and over and over. But what keeps Yggdrasil healthy and flourishing is our gods and us perpetually doing right action and doing good things. We keep our ordered cosmos healthy by enacting the mysteries of the Rhytho Rune. Our deeds go into the well. The Nornir stand around that well and bathe the tree and feed the tree and tend the tree. They tend it with the waters of our deeds, our actions, what we put into that well. That's what makes our world beautiful, or that's what allows it to go to crap. So it's very important what we do. This is writ large the smaller ritual that we do during Sumbul. During Sumbul, that horn represents that well that feeds the tree of our existence, of our Haminya. When we fill the horn with bright words and with our victories and with good things, then our Haminya, our bond as folk, grows strong. If people are drunk and say stupid things over it, if they're disrespectful or impious over it, if they make oaths that they can't or won't or don't fulfill over it, then we're all made less because of it. And it's feeding poison to our tree. That's why we take that very seriously. But that's the deeper meaning, one of the deeper meanings behind our Sumbul ritual that we do. Carry on. I just wanted to make that point there. I'm sure I will repeat myself a bunch on that, but I think the lore repeats it, and I think they do. It's done that way for a reason.
Well, and here in this next part, or just to kind of concur with what you were saying, there is so much that we allocate towards kind of replaying mythic truths from the naming ceremonies, and pulling the runes, and as we speak over in Sumbul, and the obligation. And sometimes I say that with a little tentative hesitation, when people think of faith as being obligation, but I think it is, again, what we've spoken of before. It's that debt of Ond placed within us, and it's our duty, if you will. If some people don't like the word obligation, but it's that duty of maintaining the roots, maintaining the ever flowing worth towards the gods. And even after this long drought, even more so, returning our people back to their proper faith is that maintenance. So in stanza 36, for those that might not know, this is the list of the Valkyries, or the Valkyries, the carriers of the chosen. The ones who are chosen are carried up, and you get a lot of confusion when it comes to the Valkyries, because even some of the Asatru are listed as Valkyrie, and Valkyrie are also referred to oftentimes as Nornir. So that throws even more confusion on. But it is, again, worth noting that these beings are deeply connected to the fates of souls that have been marked, the souls that have been given that sense of glory. They are focused upon by the Valkyrie. They are around, and they ultimately kind of consign your fate at the very end, which is where the root Nornir, like in Icelandic, it means witch, but it's more about the twisting of fate and the threads of fate. And so you can kind of see how that is related to the end of life for a lot of those the folk that are chosen. And so we have the shaking one, the cloudy one. We have the spear shaker, the battle, the strong. The battle counselor, if you will, and or even just again ruling the life of majesty with Reynleif. It is the I guess the dominion of regency. So all of the names are very, very interesting, but I'll read it out here. So it's Hrist and Mist, bring the horn at my will. And this is, again, very, very important because he says my will. So he, to reemphasize again, he is letting King Geroth know how bad this is. So Hrist and Mist, bring the horn at my will. Skekjord and Skogul, Hild and Thruth, Hlok and Hérfjóttur, Gjol and Geranol, Randgrið and Rathgrið, and Reynleif. Beer to the warriors bring. These are the Valkyries. I have a tendency to stick specifically to this list as opposed to some of the other interpolations, and where, again, I think Snorri, 200 years after the fall or the conversion of Iceland, and so a lot of the times titles were placed overly much on beings just to create order. And I think, like, for instance, the goddess of healing, the Ausenjör of healing, is Eir, and she's listed as a Valkyrie at one point. So again, referencing to my will. And then we move to more cosmological. In 37, Arvak and Allsvíð, or is Aurvarkur and Allsvíður. In 37, Arvak and Allsvíð up shall drag, weary the weight of the sun, but an iron cool have the kindly gods of yore set under their yokes. So, I mean, this is, again, cosmic lore, speaking of the sun, and in particular, if anybody's familiar with perhaps, I guess, Proto-Indo-European projections of what faith might be for our longest ancestors of old. And generally the idea that there's, twin horses drawing the sun, twin white horses as a reference. That is not mentioned here, but like in art, I would clearly place the two white horses, but there's no mention of them in the projected ideas that they're the sons, the twin sons of Sky Father or the gods themselves. It is just mentioned that they are Aurvak, which means some people have translated it to early waker, but it could also mean seasonal waker or year waker. Again, mentioning the idea that the rotation of the sun had as much importance as the moon, that the lunar calendar wasn't the mainstay in the Nordic lands. The sun, or at least the measuring of daylight, was also very, very important. And then there's all swift, and the gods placed within the yoke something to keep the sun from burning to the point of consumption. And this happens in a couple of ways. Also with Suna, or Sol's shield. There is a shield, and if you look at some of the cosmological things, when you see the kind of shield around the Earth, I find this pretty interesting when the scientists start talking about how there are again, in essence, a protective shield that keeps the sun from burning everything. I find those similarities kind of poignant towards how our ancestors were ultimately, somewhere along the way, long into the back, the gods, or the first storyteller Kvasir, and the tellings of the gods brought with it secret knowledges that are slowly coming into clarity. So 38. In front of the sun does Svalin stand, the shield for the shining god. Mountains and sea would be set in flames if it fell from before the sun. So here we the shield I mentioned is Svalin. And it's the protective force that keeps the sun. And sometimes when we talk about cosmological things, again, the usage of the word shield for the shining god, the masculine sense of the word. Generally, in most Aryan faiths, it's always a feminine sun. She's the daughter of the heavens. She's the daughter of the heavenly Father. The idea that this is here, this does bring into question a lot about where our ancestors stood in relation to genders and the Aust, or the Austvenir, or excuse me, the Himmenvorger, the heavenly wardens. But I think too that this, I don't know, this seems to be the usage of the word in a neutral sense, in the word skinandi godi, but I'm still looking into some of that. That's kind of an interesting stuff, and I'm kind of placing these out for people to look into them themselves if they're interested. These little things, these little threads. So now we hear about the sun, and next is 39. We talk about the dissipative forces in the middle world. Skol is the wolf that to Ironwood follows the glittering god, and the son of Rovitnir. Hati awaits the burning bride of heaven. So here again, we see the glittering god, and if we're talking about it in a gender sense versus goddess, but I think that the translation is more neutral, because it later mentions that she is the bride of heaven, the coveted daughter of the heavenly gods. And it is Hati and Skol that are waiting for her, the time limit, the ultimate consumptive force that's brewing in the edges of time, waiting for that moment. Very, very beautiful the way it's written, very ominous. And these parts, again, I wonder if these were added later or if they were just brought in again, because they kind of lose focus right before the very end. And then it all is revealed. So in 40, out of Ymir's flesh And a lot of people say Ymir or Ymir. It's Ymir. Out of Ymir's flesh was fashioned the earth, and the ocean out of his blood. Of his bones, the hills, of his hair, the trees, of his skull, the heavens high. The housey himmen, the lofty heavens. And I often, Ymir's skull, Dellinger's hall. Poetically, I use them both interchangeably. The atmosphere, So to continue on in 41, it's mentioned again, keeping on with Ymir. In 41, Midgard the gods from his eyebrows made and set for the sons of men, and out of his brain the baleful clouds they made to move on high. So the ridging of the eyebrows, the idea of the kind of raising of the mountains, if you will, that the gods, specifically the three who are one, Odin, Vili, and Ve, especially in the youngest parts of the gods and the war between the gods. So this is in the beginning of things, the shaping. And Lord Odin is saying that he knows this because he was there. He was the one that did it. And, the idea of Ymir's thoughts or brains being the baleful clouds, the storming clouds. It's really worth noting that a lot of people get a misconception about the gods. When we speak about the gods having their dominions and their powers, and Alcirogothy brings it up very well that the gods can do what they will. There is not like a god of storms in the sense that that's all Thor does. It's like very similarly, if me and Alcirogothy both picked up the same pencil, neither one of us is the person of that particular pencil. It's that all of these primordial powers that exist within the cosmos, within the circulatory system, it's whether or not the beings have the power to utilize it. So the Jotun have power to utilize the primordial forces, and so do the gods, so do the Aesir. And that's really what's kind of, being said, is that Lord Thor keeps balance within the world, whether that balance is pressure, whether that balance is, atmospheric pressure, or whether it's the balance of nature itself, climate, whatever centering of the earth, is that Lord Thor is utilizing the primordial forces within his dominion. And in so too, all of the gods, when we speak of, bountiful winds from Lord Njordr, and there's often pictures depicting Lord Njordr as like carrying favorable winds in a bottle. I think this is again referring to the fact that the gods have the ability to utilize the primordial forces that they helped shape and gain dominion over. And the reason why the Jotuns, when they come in and kind of go against that order, it is such an egregious act. Hence why Lord Thor needs to immediately reign and crush and bring that back into balance for as long as he can. That's his watering of the roots of Yggdrasil, if you will, that maintenance. This is an interesting, in 42, this is an interesting wording of text. I think people take it a little too high in its meaning. And again, that's kind of interesting for me to say, considering you look deep into certain things, but it's just that there's mention specifically of one of the holy gods, separate but aligned with the gods in a way. So the favor of Ullr and of all the gods, who first in the flames will reach, for the house can be seen by the sons of the gods if the kettle aside were cast. So, couple of things in this. I think that this is a reference towards speaking about Agnar and his turning away the flames or helping Lord Odin as he's, being beleaguered and tortured. I think it's very interesting because Lord Ullr does have a great amount of significance, I think, above or more so than in our folk that is given to, especially with place names and things of that, specifically in Scandinavia. So I don't know exactly why there's reference to Ullr and all the gods. But even today, when Lord Odin goes on the wild hunt and Ullr takes kind of stead, and that meaning, of course, the time of winter, that is a very, very powerful thing, kind of referencing to that. When Lord Odin becomes completely dynamic and enters into the middle world, it is the Lord of Winter that takes over. Again, it could be simply just poetic, and I'm not saying there's a physical exchange or moving out of any of that notion. It's just the poetic words speak of when Lord Odin moves, especially during the year, it is Ullr who presides over while he is gone. So yes, I think the reference here is speaking to Agnar himself as he frees Lord Odin. In the days of old, in 43, did Ivaldi's sons Skidbladnir fashion? I know that's a tongue twister. Skidbladnir fashion fair, the best of ships for the bright god Frey, the noble son of Njord. So remember, again, the reason why the poem is stating this is because it's for the poet to know. Skidbladnir is the ship of Lord Frey. It was fashioned by Ivaldi's sons. And then it references, of course, to the story of the kinslayer Loki before his foul deed, brought about the gifts that were given to the gods through some treachery. And that's that reference there.
Before we move on, because I think it's a good spot, it kind of transitions, I think, in the next stanza here. I want to get a couple of questions that we have on the side, both from Finn Wraith. Well, actually, I'm going to answer his most recent question first because I think it's just because I am. So anyways, do you think the people who promote anti-whiteism and degeneracy could be serving the forces of chaos? No, I don't think that. That just is true. That is.
It is true.
Yeah, that's not an opinion. That is absolutely fact. I think some intentionally so. I think many unintentionally so. But that just is true.
Can I expound on that with just one thought about?
You can, but one thing I wanted to say just in relation to what I had talked about earlier about the tree. The tree represents our existence, our reality, our world. And I think when you see the state things are in, it's an indication that the tree has been poorly tended. And so it's one of the things that we're trying to do, and one of the ways that we aim to fix things in this world is by trying to tend the tree right again, with right action, with noble deed, and with serving the forces of order daily. Go ahead.
Well, I've always poetically spoken of the fact that the Vanaheim and Jotunheim flow. They kind of imbibe the middle world with their forces, and it's interesting that Fenrir is moved from the heavenly realm down into the eastern realm, bound on an island in the Black Lake, and that his frothing that saliva drips into the lake. And I've always taken that as these forces of chaos, especially the ones that are of mortal form, that are trying to deteriorate from the middle, are kind of, again, infected by the spit, the saliva of Fenris, that consumptive nature of chaos and the desire to just tear things apart or to erode them. They are the rust accumulation that kind of is in their soul. And I've always said, that, like, and especially like in reference with my children, is like they've got Fenris's spit in them. They have this kind of foulness that just continues to work even though he is bound. And it's, again, a nature of consumption. It's a nature of just endless hunger, and nothing ever seems to fulfill. And even when they, claim to be doing it in a beneficial sense, they're all they are really doing is eroding, trying to make things, instead of, they make them irrelevant or just relative, to the point where they're no longer, having purpose. Bad guys aren't bad anymore. Good guys aren't really good anymore. That kind of stuff, even though very subtle, is part of that erosion, that sense. Mortals can be gods, and your ancestors don't mean anything. Those kind of things just slowly erode at the poignant truths that our ancestors held on to. So yeah, 100%. Don't think it, know it. I wanted to bring up that, Fenris's spit is flowing through them, is kind of I don't know. That was a poetic thing I laid in on for that.
All right. And then back to an earlier question. What do you think about books or things people have written online or videos where people talk about their personal experiences with the gods? It all depends on who and what they're saying. I can't speak with one brush on all of those things. Touched on a little bit earlier, most of the people who I have heard saying that are blasphemous and ridiculous, and their stuff is trash. Some people that I've heard say that it's profound, and I genuinely believe that they've interacted with the Aesir. To throw it all out and say it's all nonsense would be to disregard, experiences that I've had and the people that I greatly respect have had. I think the tone in which people describe them very often gives away the truth of it or not. You can tell when.
Sorry.
Anyways,
Cats are running around amok.
You can tell when somebody is speaking with piety and they're not. If you have been spoken to and had interaction with the Aesir, then in your core, in your bones, in your blood of their existence and their divinity. You can't have had that experience and be flippant and disrespectful and whatever else, either out of fear, out of reverence, out of something. You can't deal with a god with just sarcastic, silly, woke nonsense. You can't do that. as I said, one of the things, and I don't know if this goes to the story or not. Honestly, I think most of that's probably crap. And I think every now and again, you'll stumble upon somebody who really has had some very important interaction. And that's beautiful. Um, I've mentioned one of the best, like, most special things as a Gothi that you experience is when you see in someone else's eyes when our religion, our Aesir become real to them. Not, oh, I think they're real. I believe in the gods, whatever. But when like their eyes are wide and you can see that something happened transformative within them to where their paradigm of the world has fundamentally and forever changed. And when you see that, it's really special if you can be a part of facilitating that even more so. What are your thoughts on the folks and their stories about their interactions with the gods?
Yeah, that's a mixed bag of things. You find people, perhaps if they had the intention of manipulation, they'll say that they were substantiated by the gods in X, Z. You kind of see it again in the substance in which it's brought up, in the way that it's brought up, and how much of the moving sense. But I mean, that's hard again to look into with folks as they retell these tales. It's even worse if it's on the internet. You can't see or hear anything about them. I do believe that the gods interact with folks, but I also believe that in a lot of ways our minds and our souls reveal through imagery of the gods. And bear in mind, I'm not saying that the gods are, what do they call them? In the Freudian or Jungian sense, archetypes. Is that the archetypes are based off of the gods. In a lot of ways, we still utilize of those interactions. I often wonder, too, if perhaps, like I had a dream, and we spoke about this in earlier VNS. I had a dream about Lord Odin, but it was never stated. It was an older man, a obfuscated hat, and I was a child at the time, even though I wasn't a child in the physical sense, but in the dream I was. And I would correlate that to be, but I also wonder if that was a part of me understanding the initiatory process. I don't think it was Lord Odin specifically coming down to, I don't know, tell me that this is all going to start. In essence, that Lord Odin is in us. The gods are connected to us via the Ond, their ability to communicate even through the ripples and effects of these things without actually coming down.
Svan, real question: Do you genuinely not think that Odin spoke to you in that dream, or are you too cautious and take it too seriously to risk sounding presumptuous?
The latter, absolutely.
Okay, so here's case in point. If Svan were to say, hey, Matt, this thing happened to me, that's why I would believe it. A number of other things, Svan, and I know this man, would not venture outside of his lane to say something that just might, on an off chance, not be correct and be offensive to the Allfather. That makes me think that what he says is valid. Literally, some of these basement wizards, when Svan and I first got involved in this, and I understand we describe things differently, but they're so irreverent. They're like, yo, dog, me and Thor was like, we were playing some Call of Duty, and I was like, sup, homie? And it's just absurd. No real person that genuinely believes they have had an interaction with a god describes it just so mundane and profane in the real sense of the word. It doesn't have to be like overtly grossly disrespectful, but there is a reverence and a piety that comes with genuine interaction with the divine, and you can see that most of the time. Hey, you going to bed?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know.
And
Good night, baby. I love you. I see you in the morning. You want to be
Yeah.
on camera? You on there and say hi? You want to say hi?
Yeah.
All right.
Hi.
Can you say hi to people?
Oh wow, her hair is getting really long.
Yeah.
Hey,
She's
Aubrey.
got. Can you wave?
Hi.
Hi.
All right, sweetheart. I see you in the morning. I'll come tuck you in here in a minute, okay? Good night. Oh, his name's He-Man. So you guys think that I'm not crazy? Hold on, I'm adjusting my camera because it got all wonky. That's what happens when you get children all crawling up on you. Yeah. Saw this gentleman. I don't know where her and Mandy found this, but they came home from shopping. So I got He-Man representing on my desk here. But
yeah, I was going to
yeah.
say that the state of which you had said, of course, I don't want that to be. I mean, you still have to be weary of people who are reluctant to speak of, because that could be just again another laying on of that deception, if you will. So for me, like I don't know. It would be so cool.
You didn't do anything. You didn't make a claim. I put you on the spot and you answered me honestly. It's exactly what I asked you to do. You're good. It's on me if it's on anybody.
But I also think that the gods do kind of, again, work through our souls in the way that we work through things. Sometimes, are they the ancestors when they show up in your dream, or are they a part of you connected to them? I mean, you can't separate yourself from your ancestors, so they are kind of there. But is it also a representation of something going on within your mind, your soul?
So, and a kind of a nail in this for right now, just a final thought on it that I think's worth mentioning. We are emerging from a time where the frivolous and the absurd will falsely claim interaction with our gods, either through insanity, through straight up lying, through using them as a justification for their own inadequacies or poor decisions. There's all those people that will shout from the rooftops that, they hang out with the gods and, the gods told them to wear rainbow stuff or whatever nonsense. Or on the other side, there's folks that are out of an overabundance of caution and reverence, not comfortable sharing their experience. So we have this gap there that we're emerging from. And we're just at a time now where the fools are self-evident, and those who are serious are starting to share bits and pieces of that experience and add to the tapestry of Asatru and what we're doing and what we're continuously building. Because that's the thing about Asatru. It's not a science project of uncovering ancient tomes. It is a living religion. And if it's not living and we are not building upon it, improving upon it, making it better and evolving it, just like the tree, it withers and it dies. Just like all of the things we've been talking about, stagnation is death. being vibrant, learning, growing, and moving forward isn't just what it's all about. It is a mandate from our gods to us as something we must do. Victory never sleeps. Um, with that, let's go ahead and keep going until we get to the end of our poem tonight, and then we'll get the remainder of our questions.
So, Lord Odin, again, speaking in the sense that this is poetic, remembrance. This is the encyclopedia part. But again, it references the best of things in 44. Excuse me. Did we do? Yes, we did 43. I wanted to make note too. Skidbladnir is often referred to as being made of small tines of wood or flat pieces of wood. I've never actually took it that way. The translation that I have always kind of leaned towards was the sheathing blade, which has other references with Lord Frey, and I think it refers also to the fact that the ship fits within his pocket, and so the skeether, the skeeth is of course the sheath or that which can be hidden in a pocket, and Blavnir is the blade, and it does reference that again the planks of wood of a ship are kind of thin wrapped blades, but there's more poeticness to that you might find. Certain people will go on about the wood or something of that nature, and sometimes they just don't get that poeticness of the idea. Like, yes, that is a ship that can fold up and hide into his pocket. It is the sheathed blade. So the best of trees must Yggdrasil be. Skidbladnir, again, the best of boats. Of all the gods is Odin the greatest, and Sleipnir the best of steeds. Bifrost of bridges, Bragi of scalds, Hobrock of hawks, and Garm of hounds. So, a couple of things here. This is a poetic laying out of meter, and it's about kind of teaching the poet. So there's another reference to Skidbladnir. But again, Odin, Lord of the gods, highest. Sleipnir, which means the slipping one, or the one that slips between, is the best of steeds. Bifrost, the shimmering path, the fiery bridge, the rainbow bridge, is the best of bridges. Lord Bragi, best of scalds. Hobrock is an interesting one. So the Old Norse is how Brock. And if anybody's familiar with Ragnar Lotherbrock, meaning leather pants, or leather breeches. How Brock translates to high breeches, if you will. And I think this is reference to the idea of the long-leggedness or the long striking talons of Hobrock the hawk. There's no reference there outside, and I have speculated that this could be the name of the hawk that sits upon Windtorn, the eagle that sits on top of the of Yggdrasil, but there's no saying as to of it. And then, of course, of the greatest of hounds, there is Garm, the threshold of the underworld. Nipa's cave is held there by Garm. 45. To the race of the gods, my face have I raised, and wished for aid have I waked. For to all the gods has the message gone that sit in the Aesir's seat, that drink within Aegir's doors. Okay, so this is an interesting one, and it doesn't fit. It does place the placement of teaching the poet. But one thing I don't like about this is people have taken this stanza to try to correlate that Lord Odin was once a mortal. They try to go down strange paths with this one in relation to the fact that he's referring to the kind of speaking to the gods and praying to them and receiving message. I think it's also important, if you look at it from a different angle, is that Lord Odin is of the multiplicity of the gods. He's not a singular god. There's not a, this isn't monotheism, but that the balance that has been set is integral to Lord Odin, because the wisdom of the leader of the gods, the head of the gods, is that there is balance in diffusing dominion and placing all of the gods as like a strata. This is done immediately. We see this with the tripartite. All of these things are always kind of done. So I think that this lends more to that, as opposed to, again, some of the shenanigans where people are like, oh, this is the part where Odin is a man or a wizard. And again, this could also mean that this is from just the poet's standpoint, but it would be very, very out of place. So it's worth noting here that when he speaks of the ones who drink within Ymr's seats and drink from Ymr's doors. This is a big one that I see get mispronounced a lot. A lot of people say Ygir, but remember that G is a soft GY sound, so it's Ymir. Ymir, who is, of course, the threshold of the primordial ocean, the one that holds the base of much of the chaos of the middle world. And they replenish that dominion over that place repeatedly. In the stories, it's seen as the feasting between the primordial cauldron of the ocean and the heavenly gods. So that's what they're referring to. The ones who sit in those seats are the gods themselves, the Aesir. So we're moving into 46. And now Lord Odin begins the Haiti and the naming. Remember, this is, of course, poetic lessons for the ones speaking, but this is great. And it's just chock full of, good and interesting ways in which our ancestors saw Lord Odin. And remember, too, oftentimes in prayers, we already spoke about speaking of people's names, but also speaking of their Haiti. People with Haiti and with titles kind of, again, adds to their might, if you will. It gives them more gravity. And so Lord Odin has the most. So Grim, obviously, Grímnismál, the name of the poem. Grim is my name. Gangleri am I. Herjan, Hjalmberi, Thek, and Thriði. That's an interesting one, the Thriði meaning three. And that's why I often refer to Lord Odin as the three who is one, is from this. Thuð and Uth, Helblindi, and Hor, or High. 47, Saf and Svipal, and Sangatal, Hairtight, and Nikar. Remember, to the H and N are pretty much blended into the N. Bilje and Baulje, Bolverk, Fjolnir, Grim and Grimner. Again, a repeat of from before. So again, you can kind of see how meter needed to be met, and oftentimes there were things that were, doubled over, repeated without any intention other than making sure that everything fit. Glapsvith and Fjolsvith. In 48, he goes more. Seidhot and Seidskegger, Sigfather, Nikodur, Alfather, Valfather, Atriður og Farmatir. And Farmatir. A single name have I never had since first amongst men I fared. Grimner they call me in Geroth's hall. With Asmund Yok am I. And in 49. Kjolr I was when I went to the sledge at the council. Thror I am called. As Vidr I fare to fight. Oski, Bivlindi, Jafnir. That's an interesting one. That again, lending towards consumption. Even Lord Odin holds those traits of the consumptive nature. Again, hungry for wisdom. Omni, Gondlir, and Halbarth midst the gods. That's another big important one. Halbarth is the name in Grímnismál, and it is later on in the name of Halbarthsmál. Or I mean, the story of Halbarth. And I think that's there are some people who have tried to speculate that Halbarth is not Lord Odin, and I do not think that's the case. I think that it is Lord Odin, and there's clear reference to it here. So I deceived the giant Sokmimir of old, as Svidr and Svidrir of yore, of Midvinter's son, the slayer I was, when the famed one found his doom. Again, there's not much that's known about the correlations of these stories. So one of the saddest parts about Grímnismál for me is there is so much knowledge that is alluded to, but we may never know. So these are, again, references to stories for the poet to remember. And, you know, Sokmimir and Midvinter, we have, very little in relation to what stories these are alluding to. It's kind of sad. But again, these are the Haiti of Lord Odin. He is building up to letting Geroth know that he has ultimately messed up, and that his time has come. So moving into 51, and remember, just so in the beginning, in the last episode, we talked about the interesting nature of this poem ending with a kind of or beginning with a prologue, and it ends with kind of a ceasing stanza that's not in poetic meter, but just simply lays the entire thing to rest. Drunk art thou, Geroth, too much did thou drink. Much hast thou lost, for help no more from me or my heroes thou hast. This part too is interesting because there's a missing piece or a missing line, or perhaps a line unable to be read. But it does finish up quite nicely. So no longer does he have the blessings of Lord Odin or his host, the army of heaven, the Einherjar. Small heed did thou take to all that I told, and false were the words of thy friends. For now the sword of my friend I see, that waits all wet with blood. So at this point, Lord Odin is saying, you didn't listen to the right people. You were told the lies, and you have treated me in such an ill fashion that you have doomed yourself to the fate of death. And he's already alluding to what's going to be said in the outro when he says that I see this sword waiting for you, wet with blood. Thy sword-pierced body in 53 shall Ygg have soon, for thy life is ended at last. The maids are hostile. Now, Odin, behold. Now come to me if thou canst. So 53 is an interesting one in relation to the maids. The word is Disir. He translates the word as maids, and I don't think that's correct. What he's talking about is the Disir, the weavers of fate, particularly of the lives that of a bloodline. And so he's saying now your Disir have turned against you. They've turned away from you. They're afar. They've left you for me, in essence.
Elsewhere, I think in the Gylfaginning, they refer to the Nornir as three maidens.
Yes.
And the Nornir are referred to as Disir elsewhere as well.
Yeah, and I think the maidens or maids isn't wrong. Maybe he chose that word because of those correlations. It's just that if read out loud, like where maids, it's like, wait, what? And it's always
okay. So I'm going to interrupt the flow of things one more time because I think it's important. That's why I think the linguistics are really important, and being able to read over on the side is very helpful. You'll notice as we go through this that Svan catches a lot of little things over there that make a difference. And there is a difference when you are trying to render each of these poems as a completely independent piece of literature, and you want to translate something as a piece of literature. If it is a religious text and you are trying to faithfully convey the religious message in it, it's going to affect your choices as a translator, and that is important. So being able to have familiarity with the language really does help. I plugged it last time. I'll plug it again. Memrise, get on there with me. We can do it together. We can talk together, make it work. I'm going through Modern Icelandic and then a user-created course, which seems really awesome, of Old Norse and trying to pair the two. It's not perfect, but it's getting me closer. It's super, super hard. I'm not good at it, but the more I plug away at it, the more little pieces I pick up, and I'm able to, it's helping me a lot with this specifically. And I think it'll help you and be beneficial as well. So I strongly encourage that.
At this point, Lord Odin reveals himself fully. Between the flaming, pyres, he relents all of the subterfuge and goes straight into exactly, who he is. But he does give a couple of more heighty, and this is important, one of them in particular. So he says, your Disir have left you. Now, Odin, behold. Now come to me if thou canst. And that reference to is in the outro paragraph. It's mentioned that Geralt's sword is half drawn right now, as if like he knows he's in trouble and he's going to try to step forward and kind of smite this warlock that's causing all this, but to no avail. So that kind of is the reference to, now come to me if you can. Now I am Odin. Ygg was I once. Ere that did they call me Thund. Vak, so like Thund the strong and Vak the waking one. And Skilfing and Volvuth. Let me see. I'm going to use Valfuther og Hroftatir. Gauter and Yalk midst the gods, Ovnir and Svavnir, and all methinks are the names for none but me. And the interesting one there is, of course, Gauter. This survives in the Old Norse, but it was also in the Lombardic. It was in Eastern Gothic or good Sikarazda in the language of the Goths, that they spoke of Gotter, God, the God, and that word is utilized by Christians today without any kind of understanding. And I know that some of the questions on the side about divinity are going to come up, so that's a great point, and that's why I wanted to lean in on this. Is that heavenly power, the Gotter or God, is one that's mentioned here, and that word is not a Judaic word. It's not a Greek or Roman word. It is a Germanic word. So at this point, we go to the outro, and it says, King Geroth sat and had his sword on his knee, half drawn from its sheath. But when he heard that Odin had come thither, then he rose up and sought to take Odin from the fire, to relent for his grievances. But the sword slipped from his hand and fell with the hilt down. The king stumbled and fell forward, and the sword pierced him through and slew him. Then Odin vanished, but Agnar long ruled as their king. So when there's a reference there of Agnar being ruler of the Goths, then it kind of gives the idea that since he is the new king of the people, this is a Gothic tale, whether we're talking about the Gotlanders of eastern Sweden or the Goths, the actual amalgamated tribe of Eastern Germanics, we don't know. But that brings the climactic end, and the foreseen prophecy of the bloody sword is fulfilled, because King Geroth no longer wants to fight this warlock, but pull him from the fires, and it's too late.
All right, take us home, Swan.
Oh, what's with what?
With the final paragraph.
Oh, I just did.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, King Geroth sat and had his sword upon his knee, half drawn. I know I jumped right into it, so.
No, that's good. This poem is really cool. It's certainly one of my favorites. Yeah, I think it's rich with lore, but it's also told in the backdrop of a really, really neat, really cool story that's laid out. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I always kind of pictured it being animated, perhaps to, either it in its entirety and length, and kind of, with imagery to show what Lord Odin is speaking of, or edited down at least to get, the story of it laid across. It would be so cool to see.
Yeah, I think this would be a relatively easy one to do that with, and it'd be neat. Got a couple of questions here to attend to. So, a lot of things have revolved around personal interaction with the gods tonight. So Finwraith asks, also, do you think other spiritual beings who are not the gods can pretend to be the gods? And some people might think they're talking to the gods, but they're really not. What are your thoughts on this, Swan?
Well, I definitely like to focus first on the spiritual beings. One of the things that a lot of Christians have a hard time understanding is our essence of divinity versus the equilibrium of powerful beings within the cosmos. And again, they don't seem to have a problem with it in certain cases, but they do when it comes to looking at other religions per se. But in their own religion, kind of gloss over it. It's plot convenient, if you will. But the beings that have power, that can use primordial forces within this battleground that is Midgard, and I kind of view the middle world as a battleground. It is a place of maintaining order, maintaining peace. building strength, losing, substance in order to regain. There's a lot of stuff that's going on here in the middle. The gods above, the Jotnar to the east, the Vanir kind of flowing in from the west and bringing, all of these to bear in the world of the middle. And the substance of what, if your mind sees the gods or one of the gods, is that perhaps your mind utilizing the archetypical? We do it all the time when people make art of the gods, or they plug it into AI, I've seen, and they talk about the things they want to see in the pictures of the gods. So we make, apparitions of the gods all the time. Can something look like or trick? At a certain point, I don't underestimate the cunning of the dissipative forces that are out there. I believe that they are a real threat, that the gods are fighting against those dissipative forces. But to what degree? It's more or less yes, but it's because they can trick the mind of mortals. They can trick the minds of men. Cunningness, men can do that just with words, but these powerful beings throughout, absolutely. I think, but I think it's a false sense. I also think it's never fully in the same power, but we don't know, so we're easily tricked, if you will. I don't know. That's a tough one. I think that in our lore and through our mythos, the disruptive powers are cunning. And I don't want to get into the whole idea of like false prophets and so on and so forth, but I can't put it past that cunningness brings that.
I realize that my answers and Svan's answers can be frustrating because there's very seldom a yes or no. Very few questions are as easy as, are the degenerate people destroying Western civilization a force of chaos? Of course they are. But most of the questions, there's a whole bunch of nuance. Is it possible? Sure. We would be foolish not to acknowledge that, the forces of our foe have power and cunning and ability to do things. But I think there's a lot of things that go into play. The biggest thing that I think is relevant to that is for you to guard against your own confirmation bias and your own making an excuse for weakness on your part. If the gods visit you and, give you an excuse for bad behavior, I would find that suspect. So a lot of things play in. First, there's mental illness. If you're schizophrenic and you are mentally ill and you have crazy things going on that are not right because of chemical imbalance or other illness, yes, you could think that the gods you could be crazy. That's just a thing. What I think that we shouldn't discount as well is the spiritual efficacy of things that are on our team. I think that those of us who are Asatru, I'm sure even those of us who aren't, but you're much more in tune if you are practicing Asatru, have your Disir looking after you and caring for you. You have your Philia following you and, you know, in a sense, being a fairy godmother of sorts, looking out for you, you've got things. Our gods watch and look on and see. Lord Heimdallr, sees all things and hears all things and is aware. There are potent spiritual forces, if you are aligned correctly and if you're living right, that look out for you and are part of your spiritual kin fence, for lack of a better term. The other thing, life and all things require a certain amount of courage and taking leaps of faith. We can be suspicious of literally anything and everything. At some point, you have to pick something and go with it and do your best and use the best tools at hand to decipher these things. Now, I think in that regard, are our gods saying things that are consistent with our understanding of them, with our lore, with the general character of them in general? Or is what's being communicated to you radically abhorrent to the entire framework of our value system? That should, give you clues to it as well. The other thing is, don't just see with your analytical mind. The more you develop yourself spiritually, the more you build a relationship with the ancestors, with the Aesir, with seeing the world through a spiritual lens, the more you are able to see the hammer, the odor of the person around that you're interacting with. Not just do they look like, in this instance, does it look like the gods? Does it feel like the gods? Is the presence that of the gods? Sensing beyond just the analytical, there is a way of sniffing out what's yours and what's not. Stuff that's on your team versus stuff that's not on your team. Seeing, and this is one of the things, but you pick up on it. I think that many of us pick up on it in different ways, but there's something to be said for, and I think we've all had this with different people in our lives, that we may see them, especially this comes in a lot with age. Sometimes you look at someone who is withered and, diminished with their age physically, but there's something in their eye and you can see who they are behind the mask of wrinkled skin and hunched back. You can see the manifestation of their soul in all their glory. It's one of the things that's kind of was interesting to me in this poem, especially at the beginning, when Grímnir starts revealing himself and, the cloak burns up and he starts slowly, transforming, and the guise begins to leave him and people begin to see beyond the mask. They're in the presence of the Allfather, the King of the gods. And there's something to that in your interaction. So I think you should always be skeptical and be reverent. But just as much as it would be, unwise of you to act on suspicious apparitions to you that you're scared may not really be the gods, how impious of you if the gods actually deigned to speak to you in some way and you didn't heed their call. So, there's not the clean answer that I think would be the most desired from Svan and I, because the details matter. But no, I would not overly fear that. I would much more be amazed and in awe that one of our gods chose to communicate to something to me, and I would think and meditate on it and try to find the best, to be the best steward of a precious gift from the gods.
I think
Yeah,
one other thing is you can always kind of look at the outcome around people. If you see people continuously getting better, you see people making progress, making milestones, moving the glory of the gods forward, and not, miring in their own disillusion or dissipating. So when you see a lot of these people that claim that they have these kind of interactions with the gods, but you can clearly see they're still, living not great lives. They're not, they're kind of mired in their, basement or whatever. I know we use that as a joke, but like you see some of these other people out there who claim that they are blessed or given insight by the gods, and they promote, dissipative and degenerative nature, if you will. And they are, immoral, and oftentimes, bending on the relativism towards being needing good, and that doesn't produce anything well. So they could say all they want, but oftentimes you can see it in the what they're surrounded with, who they're surrounded with, and the gods do give glory to those who deserve it. And so when you see it versus when you don't, that's one of the big indicators that will clearly show where the gods are kind of residing with the folks. So I think that's a great indicator too. And I don't think we should fear, like Alcirago said, we should not fear the cunningness of our enemies, but instead simply know that it is there, and to learn from it. And then to also juxtapose ourselves, because if there is this treachery, then we must be what is not treacherous. We must be what is noble. So their existence is good. It helps us. It puts us on the map.
And I think there's a certain amount of momentum behind acting rightly, nobly, and courageously in the face of doubt. Sometimes, taking that leap of faith a little bit on some stuff, knowing that you're doing the right things and testing it out. Courage will overcome a lot of obstacles, and I do think that fortune favors the bold. That said, in regards to the next question from Yeager Kunigaz, in regards to speaking with the gods by any means, could we possibly place heavy emphasis on it being the ancestors and not directly the gods, since the ancestors are the greatest medium between us and them? Svan touched on it for a second as I was typing. So do you have follow-up to that, Svan?
Yeah, the question I would say is, can the ancestors project themselves as God forms in order to spurn things on for the better? Let's just assume we're going for that. Is it possible? Yes, I wonder and think often on that if the ancestors have the ability to act as divine, if you will, but I don't know. I at the same time, I've always felt that they seem to act within their own scope, within their own lane, and that the gods act within their lane. And there is a notable difference. I think the ancestral interactions are always way more intimate, and I feel like the divine interaction, whether it's simply through experiencing bloat, or that one time that we experienced the wild hunt at Winter Nights, it's way more it's less intimate. It's almost more like experiencing a storm, as opposed to watering your garden or something of that nature. I don't know. I can't explain it, but I do see what you're saying, that the ancestors are one of the greatest mediums between the physical realm and looping all the way back to the gods. And our gods are often referred to as our oldest ancestors. So I see what you're saying there. I think it might more depend on the individual and how they speak their language of communication. A lot of folks come into the religion from other religions. They've got a lot of monotheistic ideals. They've got ideals that aren't necessarily, I think, congruent with certain ways of thought, and they'll evolve from that. Whereas others might have interactions with the ancestors and the gods in a different way because they've kind of shed a lot of those things, whether they're coming from like agnosticism or from Christianity and monotheism and a universal faith, and or if they have notions of other faiths that are, say, polytheistic. Maybe they're inspired by Hindu or just other concepts. They may interact with the divine and with the ancestors differently. And I wonder if that has a factor as well.
So I think this is related. I would not filter messages that appear to be from the gods through the lens of trying to rationalize them as being your ancestors. I wouldn't do that at all. If you are going the other direction and you are trying to communicate with the gods and you are uncomfortable doing that and would like to try to have your, beseech your ancestors to relay messages from you or to help mediate that process in some way, okay, I can see that. And I don't think that's wrong, certainly. And I don't know that this touches on your question or not, but I do think that as a step, if somebody is coming from a place of non-belief or agnosticism, when the easiest thing to be open to outside of a atheistic, there's nothing beyond the physical existence, is the acceptance of our ancestors and the acceptance that they exist beyond death in some way. That seems to be the first thing that people can rationalize and accept. And if you're there, that you believe your ancestors hear you, but you're not quite there on having or feeling comfortable having a relationship with the gods, maybe you're not completely sold on their existence, or maybe you say you are, but you're not really convinced, and so you don't want to do anything wrong until you are. Going through your ancestors is always a really good thing. And here's the thing thrown out there. Asatru is true and right and the way to go. Me and Svan are absolutely correct in the things that we're telling you. They're the truth. They're not the ending of the truth, but they are the truth up to this point. Saying all that, whether you believe me or you don't believe me, the ancestors know more than we do. Those who have passed beyond the veil know far more of the story of what goes on beyond the veil than we do here in this life in Midgard. So if you're hedging your bets and you're just like, hey, Grandpa, I don't know what's what, but if this is the case, please pass on this. I think that's also a perfectly respectable place to start and place to go. I think that transcends a lot of things. And I think that's a good, cautious way of building a foundation. But again, I'm not sure that really addresses your question or not.
Underneath that question, I wanted to touch on something. Sotonar. I've always found the 3D one interesting myself. 3D. I didn't know if this was going to come up as a question or not. That's why I wanted to kind of grab it. The tripartite god forms are most often encountered in Celtic branches of things, but I found evidence of this in the Germanic branch. You are correct about the Celtic branch, but I would even go so far as to say, no, it is even beyond the Germanic and the Gallic. There is even people who aren't fully Aryan, or at least I would argue, because again, I just recently, me and Thomas Rousel had a conversation on Twitter about the Etruscans and how they're not Indo-European or Aryan. And I think that by the stages in which we view a lot of their religiosity, I see the influence of it. And I've kind of always looked at them as being an amalgamation of a lost group of people plus Indo-Europeans. But it was a learning lesson for me. It was really, really cool. I enjoyed the conversation. But you could see even the Etruscans have a tripartite. Christians adopted the tripartite, but for the Norse in particular, the Germanics, when we talk about Tacitus mentioning that there is Tiwos and Wodanos and Thonaras. And then, of course, too, the Eddas speak of high, just as high, and the third. So reading the Gylfaginning with the understanding that Odin might be the third, as a way of cunning and kind of a tongue-in-cheek, the high one is the third one. It's very, very interesting because it's mentioned here in Grímnismál that Thriði and Halbarður are Odin, and those are the names that he does go by. And I've always thought that very, very interesting. But yeah, when you look at the Slavs, they have a tripartite, and all the Baltics, they have a tripartite. The Hellenistic, the Greco-Romans, they have a tripartite. They numbered theirs. Deus Pater has a single scepter or lightning rod. Hades has a bident, and Neptune or Poseidon has a trident. Everywhere you go in the Aryan branches, there's always a tripartite. And it's immediate after the kind of primordial, or I guess Deus Father and Deus Mother are transformed, transfigured, or changed. That tripartite is immediately set up. And I don't necessarily think it's a static thing. It's a positional thing. I think you see that with the temples of Uppsala when they had Thor in the center of the tripartite, and then they had Lord Odin and the Holy Frey kind of flanking the statue of Thor. And that's because I believe it is about the relationship that the people have with the gods that makes the significance of that. And a lot of people will say, oh, that means that you're taking away from Lord Odin. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that it's pretty self-evident, but that our gods are, again, not entirely painted as being the Lord of such and such, and the Lord of such and such in just such a way that it's only the only thing that the Lord of winds and the Lord of healing or whatever it might be, this subject. That's not the way that works. They have these great powers, and they're fluid in the way that they can oftentimes appear, but it has to be cultural. I think it's more about the people and the way that they interact with the gods, that the gods end up answering their prayers in a way, in the proper ways that they need. They're based on their needs. And that the gods are, again, accommodating to that, or it's some people would say it's a reflection of the culture, but I think the gods interact with those cultures based on their needs, and that's good. That's a good thing. So I wanted to hit on that, just about the tripartite, and all Aryan branches have it. It's the one thing that you can spot, and I have to call it it's the figuration of the heavenly powers. The heavenly powers are not held by a one singular being of omnipotence, but that it is delegated out in order to create balance, and again, to create dynamicism.
All right. So let's go ahead and get your take on this one. Uh, what is your take on the Irminsul? I plan on erecting one in my yard. So take that question where you will, Svan.
Okay. For me, the Irminsul is the center. It is the place that connects the earth to the heavens. It is that central place. It represents that central place. I think that the way our ancestors viewed where the gods lived kind of changed a little bit throughout. I think that when we talk about the Irminsul as a symbol of order and that it struts up heaven, that it holds up the heavenly realm. In essence, it's the place that connects the gods to the middle. I think it's also symbolic of the North Star, and I think that it's a place of stasis. It's the unmoving with everything moving around it. It is the millstone, if you will, but that millstone idea that is brought about is again encapsulated on multiple levels. You have the heavenly millstone that spins, you have the earthly millstone that spins, and you have the nethered millstone that spins. These concepts are not just one and singular and done. So I often take the Irminsul to represent that it's not only the like axis mundi, the power of centralization of the gods and faith, but it's also that which keeps the heavens and the earth connected but separate, if you will. And I go so far as to believe that Lord Vidar is analogous for the next Irminsul. So when he rips the jaws of Fenris open, his foot, the booted foot, if you will, is the foot of, it's the foundation. He wrenches up and sunders chaos in half and becomes the new wide ruling one by being that new static axis mundi, if you will. So it's the center of the earthly world, in my opinion. Yggdrasil is the symbol of the central of the heavenly realm, and the Irminsul is the symbol of the center of the earthly realm.
So what Svan said. But the next part of the question that could be what he's asking, and again, there's different places you can take it. The image that we have of the Irminsul, that is the traditional, what has come down to us and been latched upon as what the symbol of the Irminsul is. A lot of people have speculated. There is a theory that it is some kind of stylized palm tree. And it's on the place where it is found. And if Nick is super fast, he can find a picture of it, and he can find a picture of the actual thing at the Externsteine where it is depicted. But there's this relief carved of Romans and a cross at the crucifixion and stuff, and then this bent over Irminsul, or as others would have it, bent over palm tree. I have never bought into the palm tree theory. A lot of the association came with, like, the idea was long there that at the Externsteine was where the physical manifestation of the Irminsul was, where that specific pole was erected and celebrated by our ancient ancestors. But if you look at it, and we don't have it up, but if we get it and we put it up for you, or if you Google it and just take a look, the other figures have three-dimensionality. They have pieces of themselves that overlap other pieces with relief stuff drawn in. There's realism to them. They're not stylized. If you look at the bent over figure that the Irminsul design is based on, it doesn't look like a palm tree. It could look like some kind of stylized palm tree, but it's not next to stylized figures. It's next to very realistic figures. So it, as a piece of art depicting the Irminsul, is convincing to me. And it's the image that we have celebrated as the design of the Irminsul for quite some time. And I think the imagery of the Irminsul itself, not just being a pole, but being a tree, is very consistent with our lore. It's consistent with sacred tree veneration as symbolic of that in our lore. We have Thor's oak as an example. The idea of a tree as a pillar comes into play very early on in the earliest Aryan stages of Greece, when you start seeing columns with stylized finials at the top of them depicting, as if it were a tree. And there's a lot of theory to that. I find that a lot more compelling. So I do have, I do see that as a authentic representation of the Irminsul and not a stylized palm tree. But yeah, if you take a look at the picture, you guys can think for yourself. If hey, there we go. So take a moment and ponder. If you look this dude on the right side of the screen, from this angle, it's a little bit hard to see it, but he's got his hand over top and across his chest. So you can do stuff. If that was an actual palm tree, you would think that the fronds would overlap one another. If it's just got two fronds at the top of a palm tree, that's kind of a messed up palm tree. You would think there would be a number more. I just think that carvers of that skill could have made it look much more like a palm tree if that was what they tried to do. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. And I think maybe that's what he's asking, because he wants to construct something similar to that. Oh, he's got a follow-up. No, he doesn't. So cool. That, I think, yeah. So anyways, there is that. I'd also like to do one more thing and kind of bookend tonight's conversation. So we started with a moment of silence for Nyx, who passed away at 31 years old, far, far too young. And it's a reminder that I want to put out there to everybody. And in her case, this doesn't seem to be an issue. This is fine, luckily, in her case. But so many people, and it happens to be fine because those making the decisions care deeply about what she would have wanted. That's not always the case. In fact, I have seen in my time in Asatru that is more often than not the case. Do your will. Get a will done. DoYourOwnWill.com. Get it done. It is easy. It is free on the site that I'm telling you. If you're in the United States and I believe some parts of Canada, do it and share it with your loved ones or your lawyer or whatever you want to do. Just do it. Now, on top of that, if you are an AFA member, I would encourage you to do it. Do multiple copies and get them all actually signed. So it is an original copy that you send, but do it and send one to the address we have on the screen to our law speaker, Alan Turnage, so that when we are notified that you passed, we have some record of what you wanted and we can advocate for you if other people decide to do differently than you've stated that you wanted. It's a good way for us to be able to help. Got no skin in this game. I've just seen too many of our people pass away, both expectedly and unexpectedly, without having this taken care of. And then I've seen them not get what they wanted. One member who was very devoutly Asatru, his parents had recently converted to Judaism. He didn't have any sort of will. So his final resting place is in a Jewish cemetery with a Jewish service, which is not what he would have wanted. Please get your will done. You can go fancy. You can pay a bunch of money. You can get a lawyer. You can do whatever you want. Get a will done. And if you're concerned about cost or it being complicated, do yourownwill.com. You can get it done in 5 minutes. You can take as long as you want, but you can get it done in as little as 5 minutes. And it's a really important thing to do, especially if you have children. Please get your will done. Anyways, thank you very much. It's been great talking to you guys. It always is. Thank you for joining us, Svan, and sharing your wisdom with all of us. Much appreciated as always. We will see you guys. Svan and I will talk to you guys in 2 weeks as we move on. And here I am stuck not knowing my Eddic poems in order. So whatever the next one is here in 2 weeks, I'm sure Nick or Svan will probably.
Grímnismál.
Grímnismál, that's it. I knew it all along. No, but we will bring you that in 2 weeks from now. Next week, I got to do some figuring tomorrow, but we got some plans and some ideas on what we're going to bring in. But we'll see you again on Wednesday, 6 p.m. Pacific. Make plans to come out to Midsummer if you can at Odinshof. It's going to be amazing. It always is. Those of you who have been before, there's been some really cool changes and a lot of improvement done to the Hof since you've been there last, so it'll be exciting to see. But until next time, hail the Aesir, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and remember, victory never sleeps.
Bye, guys.